Okay, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Script Apart, a podcast about the first draft secrets of great movies and TV shows. I'm Al Horner, a guy who longs to be a Raphael, dark and brooding, but is actually more of a Donatello, if I'm being honest with myself. This week, the talented Jeff Rowe is here to talk all things Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja ones to be precise. The Heroes in a Half Shell returned earlier this year in the astounding Mutant Mayhem, which Jeff directed from a script that he co-wrote with Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. I was expecting the film to be thrilling, and I knew that it would be hilarious. Jeff's last movie, The Mitchells vs. the Machines, which he discussed on Script Apart back in 2021, was an absolute laugh riot. And you probably don't need reminding of all the iconic comedies that Seth and Evan have penned, Superbad being just the tip of that particular iceberg. So yeah, I was anticipating laughter. What I wasn't ready for was how emotional this film would be. The trio approached the story as a coming-of-age tale, inspired by films like Ladybird and Stand By Me, and it really brought back some powerful memories for me. Memories of being an adolescent, I mean. I have no memories of fighting crime as a sewer-dwelling ninjutsu warrior, obviously. The story behind how Turtles was written is almost as radical as the movie itself. Seth, Evan and Jeff worked hard on one version of the film, only to realise fairly far into production that the story was fundamentally broken. So they got together and across a high-pressure 48 hours, tore up their script like Master Splinter tearing up bad guys, and started completely anew. In the conversation you're about to hear, Jeff and I discussed that discarded version of the script, in which the iconic villain Shredder was a Vince Vaughn type, as Jeff puts it, wreaking havoc on New York. There's thorough analysis of all the key scenes in the film, and Jeff opens up about his difficult family life growing up, and how it fed into the story that he wanted to tell here. A huge thanks to Jeff for being a fantastic guest once again, this time in person, which was fun. And a huge thanks also to all of you who've signed up to be members of our Patreon community. If you like what we do on Script Apart and want to help the show continue to grow, you can sign up by visiting patreon.com/scriptapart, where for the price of a single monthly cup of coffee, you'll get a ton of perks, including ad-free episodes and the chance to ask your questions to upcoming guests. This podcast is totally independent. There's no big team behind us. It's just me and my producer Cam. So any support you can throw our way is hugely appreciated and helps us make more episodes. Simple as that. Okay, with that all out the way, grab a slice of pizza and settle in, my dudes. It's time to get radical with our great guest this week, Jeff Rowe, discussing the first draft secrets of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. Thanks everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Script Apart, hosted by me, Al Horner, produced by Camille Demek. First and foremost, man, you know about us calling them hero turtles here, right?
I've heard about that. People told me, what's wrong with ninja?
So the history, as far as I know, is that the government was convinced that allowing these characters to be called ninjas was glamorizing ninjas and would lead to a disturbing rise in ninja children.
British ninja children.
Yeah.
British ninja children. Yeah.
It's got a ring to it.
Yeah.
I think the single most British thing I've ever heard, for some reason, this is the absolute distillation of the essence of the UK. When the second Turtles movie came out, was it Secrets of the Ooze? I forget what the title is.
Yeah.
The anxiety was so severe that the BBFC, the British Board of Film Classification, that's right, they basically requested an edit to the film. They said there was a scene in which Michelangelo uses a pair of sausage links as pretend nunchucks, and they basically asked for it to be cut right down because they were worried it might cause sausage-related injuries across the UK.
What? That is wild.
Welcome to the UK, Jeff. Welcome to the UK.
I don't get that. No, colonizing the world, no issue with, but no issue with that. But God forbid there's a sausage-related injury.
Exactly. You got to have a line somewhere.
Yeah,
a sausage line.
That's it. That's it.
Well, that's a history lesson to begin the show with. Jeff Rowe, welcome back. You're back on Script Apart, your second time with us. How's it going today?
It's going good. It's feeling great. I love London. It's exciting being here. I'm excited to be talking about this and revealing all of the secrets that we've been keeping for many years. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm especially grateful that you've taken the time out to chat with me, given how, as we all know, as the old saying goes, podcasters are the demon scum of the earth. Avoid them. Don't say hi. They lust to murder that which is different from them. To interact with them is to die.
I don't think that's fair. I think that's it's objectively prejudiced against podcasters. I like podcasters.
That is just one of many lines from this movie that I adore. Had such a great time with Turtles. As someone who grew up on Turtles, as did you, I discovered when we spoke last time. We last caught up. God, it was for a piece for Empire magazine ahead of the release of Mutant Mayhem. And I remember in that conversation, Jeff, you were telling me about how your love for Turtles began with an action figure. And I remember asking you at the time how you thought it might feel as and when you got your hands on a Turtles action figure from Mutant Mayhem, from your very own Turtles movie. Like, yeah, the emotion that might come from that kind of full circle moment. And you said the thought hadn't crossed your mind till exactly that minute, and you just started kind of laughing maniacally. So give me the update on that.
Sounds like it's really cool. It's really they sent me a bunch of stuff. I don't have the heart to like open any of the boxes yet, but it's really wild to walk into the aisle of a store and just see a section that is entirely our film, and I can't believe it's happening, and to also see people just like looking at it, to see like little kids like oh, what is this, and like watching their brains form the same synapses that mine did when I was 4 years old and saw one of these weird, wonderful things for the first time.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Have you ever worked out what it was when you were 4 years old that kind of attracted you to the Turtles when you first laid eyes on these action figures?
They were like, they didn't belong. They had like no reason to exist. They were like, they had like attitude. The graphic design was cool to me. I didn't know what cool was, but I was just like, whoa, that's cool. I think they made me laugh, but I think they also like, I wanted to play with them and make them fight and make them be ninjas. And it was just so many different things that interested me, rolled into one little enigma that I couldn't, my brain couldn't process. And I think also like my parents didn't fully understand it, and that just made me like it more. You know, it felt like it was for me.
Well, in fairness to your parents, like it's a lot to get your head around. Like I've lived with my love for Turtles my entire life. Like I think I kind of, discovered Turtles around a similar age. So it's something I realized when I was watching Mutant Mayhem that I've never questioned. I've never questioned the concept of these characters, and how utterly bonkers the concept of these characters is to anyone on the outside. The name itself, like every single word in that sentence is more insane than the last. It's like, fine, okay, they're teenagers, all right, but wait, they're mutants too, and ninjas.
That alone, like Teenage Mutants, interesting. You
Exactly.
You can do a whole movie with just Teenage Mutants. Like that's enough. Teenage Mutant Ninjas. Okay,
but wait, they're humans, right?
Yeah.
Oh no, sir.
Please don't assume. Don't rush into it. It's wild. None of those things should go together, but they do. And honestly, like I think not to preempt you or the conversation, but like there's a built-in challenge in writing that. Like you have to make sense of a thing that was designed to not make sense, just for movie going audiences, just to like wring emotion out of it and make it feel relatable and real. It's like, okay, we've got all these different things. How do we like ground that in some sense of reality? And that's a big challenge.
There's a challenge to it, but there's also opportunity, it occurs to me, because well, each of those words implies like a storytelling angle, I guess.
Yeah.
Like they're teenagers, so they're going through growing pains. They're mutants, so they're outcasts. They inherently kind of don't fit in. They're ninjas, which brings a promise of action. And they're turtles, which is just insane. So
yeah. No, I mean, when you say it like that, yeah, it was, we had our work cut out for us. It was pretty cut and dry.
This movie, though, perhaps more so than any other iteration of these characters, there's an emphasis on that word teenage. Like they're written as teens, they're voiced by teens, they're drawn not with these kind of hench bodies, but with the kind of scrawny bodies of kids going through that awkward adolescent phase. What felt so enticing about that as a place for us to begin?
I think because one, it hadn't been done before really with these characters. Like, they were always teenagers, which was always interesting to me, but also they never, I think by the time I became an actual teenager, I was like, this is nothing that cartoons promised me when I was a kid. This is such a different and much more miserable experience. But I think that's a big part of it. And I think, I don't know, like I like coming of age stories. It's one of my favorite types of film, and I think it's like a really special time in your life when you go through puberty, you start experiencing your emotions like with the amp turned up to 11. It's so much more visceral than it was before that, and you get in your head about everyone else looking at you. Like you kind of become aware that you are a social entity with status, for better or worse, and whatever that means. And it's emotional. It's emotional and it's universal. And I'm like, that hasn't really been it hasn't been explored with the Ninja Turtles, that angle, and it also hasn't super been explored in animation, or at least modern Western animation. It's usually the protagonists are younger and not dealing with like real relatable teen issues, even when they are teens. Notable exceptions like Turning Red obviously is amazing. But yeah, it just seemed like a rich area. As an artist, I'm always kind of intrigued by like what's new ground that we can break. Like what's something new that we can do, and that felt new.
That's interesting. It leads me nicely to I guess like an important question, which is when you talk about breaking new ground versus what you had to deliver to make this a Turtles movie, how did you kind of navigate those two things? Like this is an IP that's been rebooted a number of times. Not all of those reboots have been successful.
What do you mean? What are you, please? No. Yeah, of course. Totally.
But it must put you in a tricky bind in terms of approaching the project and trying to work out like, where is the room for me to play here versus what are the things that are just quintessentially Turtles. You have to include those.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think we made like an agreement early on. When I say we, me and the art team, me and Seth, but it was nonverbal. It was just kind of like a mutual understanding that we had about the way we were going to handle this material, which is we never wanted to make a choice simply for fan service. Like we always had to serve the characters first and the story first, and make sure that from a writing perspective, everything made sense. And if we're able to seamlessly integrate an Easter egg, sure. Like, but we're not gonna like do a whole setup and payoff. And this is in versions of the script, and we cut it because we didn't like it, where it's like Mikey says like, whoa, cowabunga. And they're like, Mikey, what a weird thing to say. Why would you say that? What are you, a surfer from the 90s? Haha, they have a whole bit. And then by the end, they all are like, you know what, cowabunga, Mikey. And it's like, it was fine. It was funny, but it was also meta and self-aware. And generally, like, I find meta humor to take me out of films. It's funny, it's clever, but it makes me remember that I'm sitting in a theater watching a movie and I'm not experiencing a story. And I think just taste-wise, Seth and I kind of tried to step away from that when those opportunities would present themselves. So really, it was just like, what works for the characters, what works for the story.
Yeah. This is, by the way, speaking of Seth, the furthest we've ever got into an episode of Script Apart in which, like, speaking about a film in which Seth was involved, when the guest has not yet done the impersonation of the laugh. People just love to do that.
Yeah.
How was it working with Seth? Can you talk about like the creative chemistry that you had with him and Evan as well, of course?
Yeah, no, it was really great. Seth and Evan are really smart people, really grounded for the amount of fame that they have, and really collaborative. Like there's a world where Seth Rogen gets asked to do a Ninja Turtles movie and he kind of lends his name to it and doesn't really care. He cared a lot, and he rolled up his sleeves and got in there and we wrote it. So it's like I would go to his. This was towards the end of the process when we basically had to pivot the story and rewrite the entire thing in like 48 hours. And then we had to do that a couple more times. But I would just go to his house and Evan would be there and we would just all sit around working off of a single script document and kind of just like slowly go through and to contrast the process to the way me and Mike wrote Mitchell's versus the Machines. We would talk about a scene and we're like, we need this to happen. We need Rick to realize this. Here's like 5 different ways that we can do it. Okay, Mike, you write those 3. I'm going to go write these 3. We write a bunch of different versions and then we read them out loud to each other and we see like, does this work? Does this work? What do we like? Maybe if we combine these 2, or maybe none of them work and we need to try something different. And then we talk and we go back to writing, and it's just this like constant scramble to generate a lot of material. And with Seth and Evan, it's slower. It's a different pace. It's like, okay, the turtles get here and, well, what would happen? I don't know. Let's think about that. Let's talk about that. And then we talk for 30 minutes and then we'd come up with a solution that felt great. And like, oh, the scene's missing that. The turtles need to, the turtles would make this kind of joke about this and approach it from this way. Okay, let's write the scene that way. And then we just inch forward a little bit longer. And it's even though the pace and the energy felt slower, we got just as much done in record time. And it was a really interesting new way for me to work. It was really eye-opening and inspiring.
You've alluded to it there. I've heard kind of fragments of this story about how there was a script and you realized in this sort of text exchange with Seth and the guys that it was fundamentally broken. Mm-hmm. And you needed, as you say, to kind of rewrite this entire story in 48 hours.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the panic that would have set in. I can't imagine the terror. Can you tell us the story of where the script was before and what was not working about it? I understand that script had Shredder as the villain and there were other kind of big fundamental changes.
Yeah, so it's like the very first version of the movie, Shredder was the main villain, and I'm not going to give away plot twists or spoilers about that because sometimes those things end up getting used again, and I don't want to take away from the Shredder movie that we're trying to make right now. Yeah. But Shredder was the villain. There was a Foot Clan. It seemed like the Foot Clan was composed of kids at this local high school. So the Turtles were like, oh, we have to go to high school to go undercover and find out the Foot Clan so we can stop Shredder. And one of the issues with that was you just don't care about the Ninja Turtles fighting crime. It's like an assumed thing in a lot of these superhero movies where it's like, well, and they're heroes, so of course they go out and they look to fight crime, but it's like crime is complicated. It's the product of social issues, and the idea that like a group of vigilantes are out there doling justice. I think to like me and Seth and Evan is like not a thing to root for. Like it's kind of messed up. And we even had versions where the turtles are just like discussing that. Like, why are we doing this? Like this is kind of messed up. And we're like, it's just too unrelatable. But the whole thing had been conceived of, bought, pitched, sold as a high school movie. So we're like, well, maybe they just want to go to high school and they don't know that crime is happening around them, or that basically like the inciting incident of the film is they go above ground one day. This was like towards the end of Act 1, and we had this whole like incredibly funny scene where they just show up at the front doors of a school, like dressed in normal clothes. And they're like, hi, we'd like to go to school. And the security guard is eating a bacon, egg, and cheese, and it just falls out of his mouth. And he's like, call someone. And then it's like, police show up, ambulances show up, firefighter shows up, animal control shows up. People are like chasing them with nets. Like the CIA gets involved. They pass them up to the FBI. Like everyone's like, what are you doing? Interrogating them. Like, do you have social security numbers? Like, where are you from? Just asking all of the questions that society would ask if this were to really happen in this like really very funny like 60-second scene that just ends with the US government agreeing to allow them to go to high school, and the high school principal saying like all right, I'm just gonna like answer these questions once. Yes, they are turtles. Yes, they speak English. No, we don't know where they're from. We don't know why. They will be allowed to go to prom. Don't ask questions about that. It just like it was like that, but for like 35 seconds, and then it's like I never want to hear about them again. And then we just had the turtles in high school, and Stockman was like a high school teacher that was trying to capture them for like nefarious reasons, and they're trying to avoid Stockman, and they're trying to be popular, and they're trying to like have people like them, and it was all fine. Like we had a version of that film that was very funny and entertaining, and I think a lot of people were like, great, this is such a better Ninja Turtles film than we thought we were going to have. Great, let's just make it and have it be done by this time. And we were like in the process of making that version of the movie, and a lot of things just weren't coming together, and there was a day when I don't remember, I think Seth said it first, but we were texting about it. And it was one of those, like, I don't want to say this out loud, but let's just say it. Is the entire movie fundamentally broken because they get exactly what they want on page 30 of the script? And I was like, yes, yes. Whew. Oh my God. Thank God someone said that out loud. That is, I have been living in fear and anxiety that this movie was going to be unfixable. And then we were like, yeah, no, that is messed up. And it should be at the end. If they want to go to high school, that's a thing. And then if that was at the end, you could do this and you could do this. And then it's like the whole thing is about them trying to get there. And it gives you like this whole trackable story that you can root for and blah, 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 blah. That's great. Okay, so no one's gonna like this. The studio is not gonna be happy about this, because the one constant through the process of making the film was they're like, we need this movie to come out around this time in this year. Like they gave us a lot of leeway and let us. I mean, I think that's part of the reason the movie is so creatively daring in its visual style and a lot of elements of its execution. Is they were just like, you do whatever you want, just as long as we have it on this date. And we had this conversation. It was one of those things that it's like, once you know it, you can't unknow it. You'll never see the world again in the same way. And we're like, well, we talked to our producer, Ramsey McBean, and we're like, what, to preserve the production schedule and still get the movie done on time, how soon would we need a new script? And he was like, this was on like a Tuesday. This was maybe, I think this was like around 4th of July or some summer holiday weekend, might have been Memorial Day. And he's like, we would need this by the end of the weekend. And then Seth was like, we can do that. That's great. Yeah, we'll get whatever. We'll get you a new script in a weekend. Yeah, come on. That's easy. Writing goes very fast. Don't. He's like very, very reassuring. But we like, that was on like a Tuesday. And then from like Tuesday to like Friday, we like brainstormed with a bunch of people and like figured out the plot structure of a version of a movie where they get to high school at the end. And then we essentially wrote it over that 3-day weekend. And then we're like, okay, studio, we've got an issue, but we've also got a solution. Check this out. And people were very rightfully and reasonably scared. Like the studio had given us a lot of trust and a lot of goodwill in making this. And for us to say so late in the process, we want to completely change everything. And fundamentally, like, all of the assumptions we've had about this film, it being a high school movie, we just want to throw that out. Like, is a frightening proposition. But you know, we showed them the work and we pitched our theory of what it had to be. And you know, thankfully, to Brian Robbins and Ramsey Nido's credit, they were sharp enough to see that it was an improvement and that it made the story better, and that in a roundabout way, it gave everyone more of something they wanted, which was an action film. And the Turtles being the Ninja Turtles, there's more opportunities for scenes of that in that conception. And it was and they let us do it. And then we still rewrote it multiple times after that. Like there's a version when, you know, we had started moving forward on that version of the movie and it was like way better, but it still wasn't perfect. And then it's still a mystery to me. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross agreed to meet with us about potentially scoring this film. So we went to their studio and we had this like really great creative conversation with them. And at the end, they were like, cool, yeah, just, send us a script. And we're like, we'll do. Absolutely, buddy. Seth, we have to rewrite this. We have to we cannot embarrass ourselves in front of our music heroes. Like, let's make sure this is like this script has to be Social Network good. So then we rewrote it again in anticipation of trying to impress Trent and Atticus. And that was a process that we just kept doing until we couldn't anymore.
Wow.
Sorry, I just talked for 30 minutes.
No, it's great, man. I am, to go back to what we were saying earlier about the things you assume to be the audience expectations of a Turtles film. I'm imagining how scary it must have been to have to park using Shredder as a villain, but also the excitement of how much more room that must have opened up for the Turtles themselves. To kind of just zero in on that character for a second, maybe there are limits on how much you can tell me because, we saw at the end of Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, there is a tease for Shredder coming soon. Is there anything you can tell me about your iteration of that character? You've taken a very particular and often kind of borderline revolutionary new approach to some of the other existing characters from the world of the Turtles. So yeah, how did it play out with Shredder?
No, this part I could talk about because I am confident that this doesn't work and should not be used in a Shredder version of the film. But we're like, well, um, he's a crime boss. He's like a New York crime boss. I think was like the first thought, and it's like that kind of makes sense. And maybe he's like he's kind of like a wisecracking, smooth talking, like Vince Vaughn type. Like that was kind of the pitch on his personality. And he was just such a like New York guy that maybe was always like playing with a knife and and people called him Shredder. And but I don't know if we like had him in like a samurai helmet or a cape or anything. Like he was so not the traditional character, but he was also working with Baxter Stockman. Like he was like an illegal animals dealer. He was like an imports exports guy. So he had like a bunch of swords and he had a bunch of like things and and guns and stuff that he got illegally, including animals, which he would sell to Baxter Stockman to do research on. And Stockman was like trying to perfect his ooze and create these mutants. Like the movie used to open with like Stockman doing a whole presentation where it's like, I've created a serum that'll turn animals into super soldiers. Like, isn't that great? And then the presentation goes bad and he gets fired and he accidentally drops some in the sewer. And then we had this, it was this long, it was almost like Batman Returns. Like there's like a scene going through the sewers, like, like following the baby. But like, it was like the ooze going through the sewers set to the song Israelites by Desmond Decker. And it was very like Vince Gilligan, like, it would run into a slice of pizza and it would bump and then water would drip on it and the color changed until it eventually became the green ooze that we know and recognize. And then it kind of washed its way onto some turtles. And then we just cut like 15 years into the future. And then Stockman was the whole movie was trying to kidnap the turtles so that he could understand what made the ooze work that one time, and he hasn't been able to get it to make sense. And there's like a really funny joke where it's like, it went through the sewers. Of course, it's the secret ingredient is pee pee poo poo. Like that's it. A lot of dumb shit like that that made us laugh way too hard. But he so Shredder was like a crime lord who could get him things and help Stockman in his goal to do that, who then sees Stockman, who then is like, whoa, Stockman's trying to get these turtles. I bet there's a bunch of money in that. I'm an opportunist. I should get on that too. And then he kind of betrays Stockman and he gets a batch of viable ooze and he creates this giant monster that then attacks the city, which later became Super Duper Fly. And it just like, it wasn't Shredder.
Yeah.
A lot of people I think would have been mad about that version of Shredder. It was I'm just remembering some of the scenes that used to be in there, but it's like, it wasn't Shredder. It wasn't that interesting of a character. He didn't have that interesting of a want. His whole thing was, he's like, I just want, like, some people want this, some people want to rule the world. I just want $1 billion. That's it. Just $1 billion. Like, think about that. Do you know how much money that is compared to like $1 million? Like, I just want, like, no, I'm not wounded in my childhood. There's nothing wrong with me. This, like, don't read into this. I just love money and I just want $1 billion. And it was very funny, but it didn't like make you care as an audience member. At some point, we're like, well, it's not really Shredder, so maybe we make that the TMNT lore villain Rat King. And that took some of the pressure off of that character needing to be Shredder. So then we had Rat King and Stockman, and then we're like, we also started designing mutants like Ray Fillet. We had these really cool drawings, and we introduced Mondo Gecko as a character, and Seth was like, it's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, we love the mutants. These things are really cool. Don't we want more mutants? And also, maybe shouldn't the villain be a mutant? And it was another one of those like, yeah, because if the villain's a mutant, if the turtles are mutants and they can't fit in, and the villain has the same problem as they do, interesting stuff to do from a writing perspective. And what if, and we were like, at sometime around there, like the relationship between Splinter and the kids was becoming solid, and that was becoming a core part of the story. And we're like, well, what if the mutant villain was also kind of like a father figure to all these other mutant characters that we want? And then it's like Splinter could be flawed, but ultimately good. And this guy can be flawed, but ultimately bad, or not have his kid's best interest at heart. And now we've got like a story about dads and different parenting styles, and that Superfly's relationship, sometime around there, it became the character of Superfly. And we're like, oh, Superfly's relationship with the mutants shows the turtles something about their own relationship with their dad, and vice versa. And it just started, like, wires started crossing and sparking, and it started making sense, I guess.
Yeah. When you describe, not to labor too long on Shredder, but when you describe him as like a Vince Vaughn type in your mind, had you got that far in terms of casting? Was Vince Vaughn likely to be someone you would have approached?
Oh yeah, no, we were talking about it. We're like, yeah, I guess we cast Vince Vaughn. I guess if he's a Vince Vaughn type, we should probably cast Vince Vaughn, huh? Is that a cool decision? Do kids care?
Love Vaughn.
Yeah.
Kids love Vaughn.
They're all about it. That's I see the t-shirts that they wear, screaming in the toy aisle for more Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's we never started casting that. I think we kept delaying because we're like, we can't cast this character yet, because we were all kind of looking at each other and like body languaging, like, I don't think this is going to stay in the film, but we don't know what's going to replace it yet.
It's interesting. Well, if it's okay with you, let's dive into some scenes from the finished movie.
Oh, of course.
So the movie begins with this raid, and we sort of descend upon the sort of lair, if you like, of Dr. Baxter Stockman. We learn through this kind of tactical team briefing, as this kind of armed squad of goons descends on his place, that he's a genetic scientist who went rogue with billions of dollars worth of research, and he's created actual mutants. So you're essentially starting the film with Superfly's origin story, and I guess tangentially the origin of the Turtles, although it's not their scene, that's still to come. Can you break down for me what felt so right about this as the starting point for Mutant Mayhem?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's there's not a joke in the first 5 minutes of the film, which is vulnerable for an animated family film, because it's like, even on Mitchell's, it's like there's like a laugh within the first like 30 seconds, and it's like, okay, we've got the audience, they're engaged. I can sit in my theater chair comfortably now. With this one, it's like, I guess people seem tense. I hope they care. I hope they're watching. But we wanted to establish real stakes. Like, the turtles are going to be fun and lovable and goofy, but like, this will take place in a real world, and it's a movie is only as tense and compelling as you as an audience member can believe that something might actually go wrong, horribly wrong. And to kill a character in the opening, a major canonical character, in a way that isn't funny or I think even like overwrought emotionally. It's kind of matter of fact. I think just sets up like, oh, anything can happen. And also there's a really scary, powerful mutant baby fly out there. We think we don't ever really get a good look at it in the opening. But it basically told us where the ooze came from. It told us where the turtles came from. It told us and the audience, like, things are going to get interesting later. We're going to go like be a mumblecore film for 20 minutes after this, but stick with us. Like, things are going to be really compelling when we get back to them. And I guess that's what it served.
Something interesting is introduced in that scene as well. Like, Stockman promises his mutants he's creating a real family for all of us. I never had a family. And family is going to play a big part in this movie, as it did in Mitchell's. How would you describe, what that word family means to this movie and the ways in which, it differs from what maybe you and Mike Rianda explored in Mitchell's? Because, well, it strikes me here that, the characters making bad decisions in this film are characters who maybe don't have great familial relationships. They don't have those people around them to hold them accountable, to reset their moral compasses when they go askew, and so on.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing for me personally, because like I did not have a very good family growing up. Like I kind of had a rough childhood, and I had aunts. I had extended family that was like really nurturing and loving to me, and I think I owe a lot to them. But my nuclear at home family was not great. And I also never knew my biological father. So it's like the guy who essentially raised me as my dad was like my adoptive stepdad. And I at some point at a young age, or at some point in my life, I was like, that's a cool thing to do. Like to take on someone else's kid and raise it as your own. And it's so I've just personally, I've always had a slightly unusual definition or concept of family.
Yeah.
And I think when we made Mitchell, something that I'm really proud of that film, and I'm really proud of the story that we told, but I think I was also a little bit bummed out because it was a film that affirms like family is important, family matters, and it was affirming a very like traditional nuclear family.
Yeah.
And I think family does matter. I think community matters. I think friendships and relationships matter. But I think like family for me is something that you define for yourself. And anybody can theoretically be your family. It's kind of what you make it. And so it was like important to me that Splinter be an adoptive father.
Yeah.
Also, it just made sense because he's a rat. They're turtles. He found them. They're not blood related. They don't have a lot of money or conveniences. Splinter is pretty flawed as a parent. Like similar stuff to Mitchell's, like depicting a flawed family, but there's love underneath it. All felt important, and then at the end of the movie, their family grows and they adopt more people into it, and it kind of affirms that idea of found family. Like we always used to joke that the end of the movie is like the end of Boogie Nights, where it's like these weird this like group of strange people come together and form this like beautiful little family together, and it shouldn't work, but but it does. And we even had like a montage set to God Only Knows that was like almost straight out of Boogie Nights. Of just like the mutants like finding their place in the world. But I guess that's like that's the idea of the film is family can be anything you want, and also it's like your dad is not always right. Like we did, like the Turtles were like, don't really do anything wrong. Like Splinter is kind of wrong. They maybe shouldn't listen to him or his like crazy ideas about humans. And it was really important to me and Seth and Evan to have Splinter come around to the turtle sides of things and recognize his own flaws and be like, I want to support you and help you. And I don't get this, but it makes you happy. So I'm going to help you in this because I want you to be happy. And I see now as a parent, based on this other bad job of parenting that I just watched, that should be my priority. And it all kind of like made sense and felt true to me, I guess.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for sharing that with me, Jeff. I love how I already found the Splinter aspect of the story really emotional. That's knowing that there's like a kind of personal link for you there that adds definitely a different context to it. I love the character Splinter, and I love how even though he's their mentor and ostensibly, just an old dude, he's not complete. Like there's emotional growth that he has to undergo in this movie. As you say, in terms of his relationship to humans and his almost kind of Finding Nemo-esque overprotection of his kids. There's fear to this version of Splinter that you kind of weave into jokes. Like there's a great line where he says, "You're all I'll ever have. There's no app to meet other mutant ladies. Trust me, I check every day," which is funny, but it's also kind of tinged with heartache. The Turtles really are all he has. And he's a supporting character, but you've given him almost like a main character depth, if you like. Was that hard to find, or finding his own personal arc in this? Like, how did you approach that?
No, I mean, like, I think you're scratching at something that we didn't explore in this film, but is maybe something to explore in the next one, and it's something that's really interesting about their relationship to me is Splinter. How much of his raising the kids and finding the kids and loving the kids is about loving them, and how much of his is about him and his own trauma and never being liked by anyone, and then he finds these like 4 innocent turtle babies who like idolize him, and it's almost like a transactional relationship for him or something. Like, like I believe fully that Splinter absolutely loves the turtles and cares about them deeply, but I think he's also flawed, and there's some there's some emotional profit in it for him, and I think that's something to explore. And I think we even had a version in one version of the scene that people were like, whoa, that's like too intense, but where Raph like called him out, and it's like, you're not even our real dad, like you just found us, we're just like the only things that didn't hate you, like you don't care about us, and people were like, I don't think you can have the characters say that. I was like, no, that's exactly why they have to say it. It's so real. Yeah. And it's such a real thing for a pissed off teenager to say to their parent. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I like writing when it's, I like writing that engages with questions like that and maybe doesn't immediately have an answer. And it's like, okay, yeah. What is true? like what's how would the characters respond to and explore this? I don't have the answer, but that's like an interesting shade to Splinter that is something maybe worth looking into. I don't know.
We fast forward 15 years. We then meet the Turtles. I love how they're introduced. We see their silhouettes leaping between rooftops, as Leonardo says in this kind of gravelly voice. Master Splinter has given us a very important mission for tonight. The target is across the street. We must use stealth and cunning to infiltrate the human world and retrieve Go-Gurt. And also on the shopping list is 4 quarts of non-fat milk, ice cream, veggies, and a party-sized bag of Cool Ranch Doritos, which apparently Splinter has underlined twice. He's very keen on these Doritos.
Loves them.
Can you tell me about how you had a lot to do in this kind of introductory scene, establishing the distinct personalities of each of these characters? How did you arrive at this scene and the particular way in which you established those personalities?
I think Mike Rianda actually wrote that line. There was like a 1 month period in the first year of the film where he was helping me do some script stuff. It was like important to us to say in kind of that like promises we're making to the audience in the first 5 minutes is like, there will be action, there will be these things. These Ninja Turtles are going to be different than what you're expecting, but they have the ability to be what you want. We're going to showcase a little bit of that here. We'll get back to it later, but right now we're going to meet them as just very real teenagers, and so much of the specific nuance in their personalities just came from the actors. Spent a long time casting, and those 4 kids are so fun. Like
it out the park.
Yeah, it's so, and just so much just came from them and their chemistry with each other, and we used to have way more scripted jokes in that scene, and then we kind of just had to throw the script out and like do an improv thing live in the room, and so really it's just them showcasing their own personalities, and then we kind of built that in edit. And the thing is, like, I don't think Nick Cantu is actually a fan of Tom Brady. We're just like, oh, that'd be funny to say that. So Seth would yell out like, I would love to have a champagne brunch with Tom Brady. And then Nick would read it and we'd like edit it in. And a lot of, it was just a lot of like finding that in the room more so than on the page.
The Brady thing, like there are so many kind of pop culture references that are kind of dropped in this mumblecore segment, as you say, of the movie. At one point, I forget who, but one of them describes Drake as the GOAT of all time. Someone else mentions that Adele is transcendent. But these pop culture references, they're not just deployed to make the film feel current or to tell teenage viewers, look, these guys like the same things as you, relate to them. Instead, like, you know, the pop culture references seem to be windows into this longing that the Turtles have to be part of the human world. And we have that brilliant scene where they sneak into a Ferris Bueller screening, which is a really moving example of that. That's kind of like the emotional core of the movie in a way, that longing.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about like how you arrived at that emotional core? And then, how Ferris Bueller ended up being kind of the establishing articulation of that.
There's like 5 things there worth commenting on. One, that he's like the GOAT of all time is a thing that Brady Noon, who plays Raph, just like randomly said when we weren't recording, where he's like, that guy's like the GOAT of all time. Oh, that's funny. I just said a really funny thing. And he kept saying like, can I use that? Can we use that somewhere in the movie? And he also just always talked about Drake. So then at some point when we were doing a recording of that scene, we were like, oh, Brady, say your GOAT of all time thing and be like really proud of the line that you came up with. And it's like it like the writing process of those characters came from just like listening to the kids sometimes and just like, oh, cool, okay, we can't use that here, but we can use that later. Let's like remember that and put that in. But yeah, like the pop culture references are about their aspirations, you know, like to them, they're very aware of human culture, and they want, I think the same things as probably a lot of human teenagers who don't have the hurdle of being mutants. And it was just a way to like paint them as having these like really big dreams of fame and celebrity and all the things that you think are going to make your life easy and better. And I guess I was kind of inspired by Cinema Paradiso. There's something like really sweet and human to me about like a group of people getting together in a dark room to just watch a movie. It's one of those like silly things we do as humans that's so meaningful and also it's like I'm a movie fan, so it's like, oh, that's a thing the Turtles can't do. That's a thing that they have to be on the outside of, and it's interesting just thinking about the kid and the projectionist in the booth in Cinema Paradiso. It's like they're watching the people watch the movies, and the Turtles are watching people take something for granted that they would kill to be able to do. And we tried a bunch of different movies there, but landed on Ferris Bueller specifically because of the parade scene, because that was so far away from what they could conceive of ever being able to do. It gave them like the greatest distance to travel emotionally in the story.
Yeah. Are you able to say what some of the other movies were?
Yeah, we had we had like Breakfast Club at one point. We tried Superbad, but there are not clean 30 seconds of that movie that we could edit in without losing our PG rating. An editor did a very funny thing where he tried putting Carrie in there. And so it's like Carrie is like winning or becoming like prom queen, and everyone's like clapping for her. And then the Turtles like go into the sewer before anything goes wrong. And they're like, wow, Carrie, you really did it. We wish we could be like Carrie. And it's funny, but it's meta funny. It works for us, but not for the actual audience. And Ferris Bueller just visually gave us everything that we needed.
Yeah. I could have watched like an entire film of just the Turtles messing around, slicing watermelons and making goofy videos on their iPhones. But at some point, of course, like the story has to start. And it really begins in earnest when their ninja star hits April O'Neil, whose bike gets stolen in the aftermath. Let's talk about April, because I think I have a lot to work through in terms of that kind of canonical character as someone who definitely went into journalism with some promises made to me by that early. I really thought as a kid, I was like, oh, I guess that's what being a journalist is like. Yeah. It has not panned out that way. But yeah, there's some interesting things that you do with April. Like there's a lot of the old April that you upend completely. This feels like a new character, but still feels spiritually true and true to the iconography of the character. Can you talk to me about, your intentions, what you set out to do with April?
Yeah, I mean, April was always a strange character in the world of Turtles, where it's like she's is she their mom? Is she their love interest? It's kind of both. It's this like weird
Freudian nightmare.
Yeah. No, there's some like weird vibes between her and the Turtles in a lot of the media that's been done, and also in the ways that she's been depicted. It's like, oh, they really had fun doing that drawing, and we're like, we don't. They want to be normal teenagers, so they need to meet a teenager. And it's like, okay, so she's a teenager. Is she a teen reporter? Is she like a precocious upstart, like a Tracy Flick character or something? No, that's not like relatable. Like she just needs to be like a real New York teenager. And honestly, it would help the story if she's a little bit of a social outcast, like they are. And it just really came from this place of like, we want her to feel like the fifth turtle, and we want their fates to be intertwined with each other, where it's like she can help them get what they want and they can help her get what she wants, which for a while was like, she's like, I hate high school. I just want, it's kind of Katie Mitchell. Like, I hate high school. I just want to like get to college where I'll be cool and appreciate it. And man, if I could like break the story of this, like that would get me on people's radar and I could probably get into an Ivy League and that'd be great. I could have my own TV show like April Tonight. Wow. That'd be great. And she was like very self-interested, which was funny. But I think like a lot of people were like, I wish she was a little less self-interested. I wish it wasn't like, it almost feels like she's just exploiting them. And we wish it was more personal to her. And then we're like, okay, we need to like actually share backstory for April and maybe hint at why she feels like an outcast or what she stands to gain personally, and like making her story, as similar to the Turtles as possible felt really useful as a storytelling tool.
And the kind of puke backstory, that must have unlocked a lot for you.
Yeah. That was kind of, it was just really funny. That was very late in the game, where we're like, we need something for April. Like I think Seth pitched it. Our co-director, Kyler Spears, storyboarded it in like 24 hours. We put it in edit, slapped on a Natasha Bedingfield song, and it was so. And I was very skeptical. I'm like, guys, what are we like? We're just taking our we're taking the character of April and making her puke girl. What are we doing? And then we watched it and I was just like, this is very funny. Wow. Okay. It's hard to deny. And I like showed it to some people that I trusted and everyone's like, yeah, that's really funny. I mean, that's really, and then we, eventually it made its way into a test audience screening and it killed it. Like it played so well, that we stopped debating it and we're just like, okay, this is in the movie now. It's working. Like, the numbers were insane. April, like people rating April's likability as a character went up like 15 points, like based on adding this puking backstory. It worked.
I really, really like the idea of Natasha Bedingfield waking up one morning, checking her Spotify streams and being like, that's interesting. Where's that spike come from? And then
bit of an uptick. What's yeah. Or just like going to see the movie, taking like a nephew, and then being surprised.
It is a banger.
Yeah. Great song.
When the Turtles chase down the guy who stole April's bike, it leads to kind of the first big fight scene of the movie. And I love how ill-equipped and unsure of themselves the Turtles are, because of course that gives them room to grow across the story. There's so many great lines in this sequence. So Donatello saying, I don't know if you guys noticed, but all I have is a big stick. How did I end up with a big stick? That kills me. But I think my favorite line, or two lines as they're kind of separated, comes from this thug who observes that the Turtles look like mini Shreks. Then later he yells, murder the Shreks, which brings me to an important question. Did you think the line, murder the Shreks, might get taken out? Were there other lines that did get taken out because they were pushing the envelope a little bit?
I'm probably so many things that got taken out and I can't remember now because I think I've blacked them out from my mind out of bitterness. But that was one of those ones where it's like, it just used to be like, oh, they look more like little Shreks to me, which I think might have been a Mike Rianda improv. He voices that character. And then we had to get him back in to get a clean ADR take of the line that used to be like, maybe they'll see the humanity in our tragic backstory. Murder the freaks. And Mike was like, I think it'd be funnier if he said murder the Shreks. And we were like, yep. Yes, it would. Yeah. So he did a take of that, which was very funny. And we're like, okay, it's got to be that. And then no one called it out. I don't think anyone I think people took more issue to him saying murder than they did to any reference to Shrek. Like that was not... even on people's radar as an issue. And then Trent and Atticus were gracious enough to let me help them title the score tracks for the film. And when we're like, well, we got to come up with a name for this Chop Chop song, I was like, Murder the Tracks. So it's called that. You can listen to it on Spotify or wherever you get your music.
Yeah. In terms of those kind of slightly more adult lines that creep in from the margins, there is a line that I noticed just rewatching the movie last night. Seth's character getting to say, after a rousing speech, "It was rousing. I'm fully roused."
Yeah, yeah.
I'm amazed that was able to stay in.
That sadly we had a funnier line read of it, and then we had due to like a sound issue, we had to change it. But it used to be like 20% more provocative, based solely on I think it was more like, "Oh, I'm fully roused," which always made me laugh, but probably to our benefit, it changed.
Yeah. There is, as April and the Turtles team up, there's a blink and you'll miss it shot that we see where April's kind of flicking through her notepad while she's on the phone to the guys. And it struck me that there's so much comedy and storytelling in this one shot as there is across the entire movie. There's lots of things that sort of exist in the background as little tiny jokes or little tiny pieces of storytelling. In this particular moment, you see her notepad full of questions like, are they the source of COVID? How many people has the red turtle stabbed? Does he need therapy? And I'm curious, like, at what point this sort of storytelling comes in, whether it's something that's done in the storyboarding phase. I'm guessing it's not in the script. And maybe you can share as well if there's a particular gag in the movie along those lines that people haven't noticed.
That was like the shot's going into production. We need to know what's going to be on this thing. And I was like, oh boy, we got to write something to put on there. Kyler, co-director Kyler Spears, like, you got anything? And he's like, give me an hour. And then he like came back and he just wrote that. I was like, great, done. It's in the film. Can we commit it to print forever? But that was like, I think a later-ish ad. I'm trying to think if there's other stuff like that. Signage, stuff like that generally comes in later in the process. Like Cool Ranch Doritos being underlined twice, like, was very early. That was like a thing that was initially called out. I'll think on it. I'll let you know if anything comes to mind.
It's after this that we're finally introduced to Superfly. I think, earlier on in the movie, it's kind of teased that's going to be the villain here. And there's this moment early on as we're introduced to the Turtles where they're climbing a building. There's a huge skyscraper TV with blaring audio announcing that all these heists have been occurring across the city. As a tangent, these big skyscraper TVs are incredibly useful for, exposition in movies. I would hate to live across the road from one.
Yeah. I don't think they actually exist in real life. I mean, I just spent a week in New York and it's like, there's big screens, but they are not playing the news with audio. That is a film. That's a little bit of movie magic.
It is indeed. Yeah. But in terms of Superfly, the character, when we do eventually meet him, it's so satisfying. I'm also just like really curious as to the calibration in terms of letting the audience understand the pain behind his plot. Like some of the best villains are, they tick that box of like, they have all this menace, but you also kind of empathize. And I'm wondering like how you arrived at that character, his pain, and the sort of vengeance, I suppose, he wants to enact upon the people who've shunned him.
Yeah, I think we didn't like. I think what you said is true. Like the most interesting villains like have a reason, or in the rare exception, like Nolan's Joker, who it's you don't know what he is or what he's about, and that's what makes it appealing. But generally, like an empathetic villain is something I'm drawn to as a film goer. And Superfly's a victim. He saw like a horrible tragedy when he was very young, and he had to raise a family on his own. And it was really important to us to give him a chance to redeem himself. Like he like, we don't want to just like punish him for all of the mistakes he made up until, you know, he's about to activate the machine. Like he's messed up, but he's also a product of his environment. And, you know, if watching The Wire for 5 seasons taught me anything, it's like blame the systems, not the street level criminals. And he gets a chance to basically like Splinter appeals to him, and he basically has a chance to like just stop fighting and try to accept family and friendship, and he can't do it. He's too far gone, and it leads to him having to be stopped. But I think we tried versions of the ending where he realizes he's messed up and he has to sacrifice himself to save his mutant family. And it was a sad bummer, and I think audiences would have hated it, but like Seth and I loved it. We're like, it's so cool. Like we had a conversation at some point where it's like, something I don't like about superhero films often, they don't always do this, but a lot of times it's like the day is saved, things are resolved emotionally because somebody like kicked and punched better than somebody else. And it's like, what a stupid way to settle conflicts as like adult humans. Like it's better. It felt better to have Superfly come to some kind of emotional growth and to have the Turtles help get him there, not through kicking his ass, but through empathy and being good to him. And that ending didn't work, but we kind of transmogrified it into them doing that for the Turtles. Like they aren't able to save Superfly, but they're or for the mutants. Like they aren't able to save Superfly, but they're able to win over their friends, and having them as friends ultimately helps them defeat Superfly. So it's like they do a cool action sequence at the end where they like dunk the ooze into him, and it's really compelling. But it's like the reason they triumph at the end of the movie is because they're just cool, likable dudes, and because they're open and because they're curious, and it allows them to make friends. It's like their ability to make friends is ultimately what saves New York and stops the bad guy. And that felt like a better message, I guess.
Well, that end sequence, there's quite a few interesting things happening there. Like they have to learn to want to be heroes for the sake of being heroic, not for something transactional. Previously, they've been doing heroic acts in hope that they will be accepted. But they have this moment within that sequence in Times Square where they realize that the narrative around this is everyone hates them, but they have to decide to save the day anyways. You've also got the fact that they're not alone. As they kind of, just decide to go ahead and try and save the day anyways, New York kind of rallies around them. They're helped by kind of unsung everyday heroes of the city, like bodega workers and construction workers. Can you talk to me about that, actually? I find that interesting. It feels like a very New York choice. Like it would have been weird not to at least acknowledge, like it being the age that we are growing up in the geopolitical kind of situation that we have. Like that's something we've seen of New Yorkers, right? Yeah.
And it's something, it's in one of the Raimi Spider-Man movies too. And it's I like, New York gets a rap for being like a hard city with like curt people, but I actually find it to be a really warm place. Like people are terse, but they care and they look out for each other. So it felt appropriate for the city, and also there was so much anti-human rhetoric in the film, and there was so much like the turtles just want to be affirmed by humans, and it felt really important to give them that. Like they didn't like it's not like a version where they summon the strength and they do it and they save the day, and then humans are like, hey, you saved the day, thank you, we're gonna clap for you, and we like you now. Makes me hate humans. I'm like, no, that's bad. I don't like that. Like it's better for them to be part of it, rolling up their sleeves, working with the turtles to fix the problem. And it kind of speaks to this. It imagines goodness. It imagines collaboration in society and people being able to accomplish great things working together, which it just felt appropriate for the film, I guess.
And I guess the other thing that it's easy to not notice amidst the spectacle of everything else, there's no loose parts. Like April has something to do in this, amidst all this chaos. Like she is hijacking the airwaves, overcoming her fear of being on camera to sort of grab back the narrative that the media is like spreading about the turtles and show them as the heroes they are. Even Splinter, he has something to, he's hooking up, admittedly, but he's finding something to do in this sequence. Was that tricky, kind of finding, keeping all those plates spinning in terms of the mutants are here, Splinter's here, April's here?
Yeah. I mean, that was a part that I think we kept rewriting until we got the cleanest, simplest version possible. And there's kind of like a writing cheat in there that I'm reticent to call out on on this podcast. But it's like we're like, oh, there's an explosion, and then the mutants scatter, and then we just kind of conveniently put them on a shelf for like 15 minutes of screen time, and then bring them back when they're helpful. So it's not as elegant as it may seem, but you're not thinking about it while you're watching it. You're just invested in the turtles, and like that's the kind of stuff that I think is really like the only way I know how to write it is to just like try something and then try it again and try it again like that. Okay. They do like, they rally together. Okay. The giant monster forms, and that's scary and that's bad. But Splinter gives a speech, so they rally together. Cool, we're feeling good. They do travel across the water to that MOP song, and it's like badass, and I'm so excited. Great, we're going up. They try to shoot it, but they fail, and their whole plan fails, and now it's bad, and now they're scattered, and now it's getting worse, and now they find out that humans hate them, but they're rallying, and they're going to fight them anyway, and they're going up and up and up again, and it seems like they're going to do it. And then he catches them, and then now it's somehow worse than it was before. And it's things that like, it's like playing a game of Operation, the board game. I don't know if it exists in the UK, but it's like,
yeah.
Okay. Where it's like, you're just like instead of a buzzer, it's just like writing rules you've been taught your whole life. And it's like, don't get electrocuted. Like Robert McKee's voice is in my head. Like he's going to yell at me like an adaptation. Like, oh no, like you can't have the third act ping pong that much from good to bad. And we have too many like fake endings. And oh God, now we're Return of the Kinging it, where it just keeps ending and ending. And, but I still don't know how it ended up working. So sometimes at the end of like a movie like this, it's like climbing a really tall ladder or something. You get to the top and you're like, I did it. Oh God, I shouldn't have looked down. How did I get up here? This is a miracle. Nothing about this should work. But yeah, somehow it kind of works. Don't watch the end of the movie too many times, people. Please buy it on digital, stream it on Paramount Plus. Leave the room for the last 20 minutes. Don't analyze them. Don't pull at any of those threads.
But the coda, if you like, in which like that thing that originally was on like page 30 of the script, that you've now transposed to the end, the turtles getting to go to school, it's really beautiful, like the importance of how that all plays out. Like, I love the simplicity of the shot from, I think it's Mikey's point of view. He opens the sewer manhole cover into daylight, and the daylight's almost blinding, and you realize it's so important to go into his point of view there, because he's always going out into the cover of night, and there's like a larger theme in the film about like not being able to be seen because you fear you won't be accepted. In this moment, in like that combination of shots, you see them stepping out, and then you also see the kind of bandana, I don't know the official name for that mask that they wear over their eyes. Like Mikey's bandana just floats down into Splinter's hands. It's really beautiful, and it hits all the emotional beats that it's supposed to. Can you talk to me about like finding that visual articulation for such an emotional thing? It's so beautiful.
Well, that was our producer Ramsey McBean's idea, and that was actually a solution to a technical problem that we had. I would love to be like, yeah, that was, you know, I had that image in my mind.
It came to me in a dream.
Months now. Yeah, it just I woke up, I wrote it down on a piece of paper and fell back asleep, and then no, it's such a beautiful Ponent image. But we were working with two vendor studios who each made different assets for the film. So Cinesite in Vancouver had a sewer, and they had turtles wearing masks, and they were doing that part of the film. And Mikros in Montreal and Paris were doing the school part, and they had a version of the turtles wearing school clothes, but no masks. And this was from a very early version of the script where they had modeled the turtles wearing school clothes. So we had to transition from one vendor studio to the other, and we couldn't, like, Cinesite technically wasn't able to have them remove their masks in that scene. And Mikros wasn't able to add masks in the following scene. So we just had to, they leave the sewer, and then in the next scene, they don't have masks. And McBean came up with this idea of like, oh, we could just cut to Splinter, and we can animate a single mask floating down. That's within our budget and time frame constraints. So let's do that. And we're like, yeah, that's a great, beautiful image too. That solves our technical issue, and I think makes the movie better. And it's a shot that a lot of people comment on. And it's like, that wasn't added until the final month of the movie. And it was just to solve this technical issue. But it worked.
Yeah, that's so crazy. And of course, then the film ends with, as I say, that post-credits sting that kind of teases at more to come, teases at like an entire organization to be taken down, and of course Shredder in the mix. Where are you at, if anywhere, on a sequel? Have you made any inroads? Is that a conversation you've been having yet, or where are we?
Yeah, we're, you know, with slight time taken away for me coming to London specifically to do this podcast, no other reason. You've cost the sequel 7 days.
You're not going to invoice us,
what?
Are you? You're
not you'll be getting quite a bill in the mail. No, like we've begun on it. We're thinking about it. We are. I don't want to say too much about it, but I just know it needs to be different in a lot of ways. Like, I think this first movie was a success because it was like me and a team of animators, a lot of us doing this for the first time, being like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And we had this like teenage trying to get away with shit energy about making this film. And I think there were a lot of things that it's that climbing to the top of the really tall ladder thing where it's like, if we had known how scary some of this stuff was, or how dangerous we were to not, or how close we were to not pulling it off, we might've been afraid. And it's like, so we can't, like, a sequel won't be successful if we come at it thinking like, oh, we know how to do this now. We've got this. Like, we need to be just as curious, just as taking nothing for granted, assuming nothing as we were on the last one, and just like keep pushing boundaries and keep trying to start shit, because I think that's what'll lead us to a something successful and beloved.
Can I throw an idea out there?
Please bring them.
2 words: sausage nunchucks.
Oh, great! That's what. Are they gonna have to ban it in the UK?
Yeah, well, I won't be able to see it. I'll just take a flight but...
That's great. It'll be perfect. We'll get it back for y'all.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could. Jeff, this has been so much fun. It's been a very rousing conversation. I'm fully roused right now. There you go.
Both, yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the show again. Back for seconds. Really do appreciate it, Jeff. And congrats again on this amazing movie.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful, wonderful talking.
Round 3 still to come.
Yep, yeah. 3 years. I'll see you back here again.
You've been listening to Script Apart. Thank you so much for tuning in. A reminder that if you want to help the show continue to grow, you can join us on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/scriptapart or clicking the link in today's show notes. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.